A humble drone, thinner than your hair, sneaks through enemy jamming and takes out a train carrying 840 tons of fuel. All controlled from 35 kilometers away by a pilot watching uncompressed HD video. Sounds like sci-fi? Welcome to the new world of war in Ukraine. At 3:47 a.m. on June 22, 2025, a Russian fuel train rolled east under the quiet night sky, completely unaware it was being watched. Ukrainian operatives, hidden far away, had been tracking this train for 4 straight days. They knew everything: its departure time, how fast it usually moved, and most importantly, the moment when it would be farthest away from any Russian air defenses. Russian soldiers scrambled, manning anti-aircraft guns, launching flares into the dark. The sky lit up like fireworks, but these weren't for celebration. Panic spread like wildfire through military bases. It wasn't one drone strike, it was wave after wave. From Kharkiv to Krasnodar, each explosion was a message. Ukraine had taken the war deeper than ever before. One of the most stunning attacks came near the heart of Russia's own backyard. A military airfield in Kursk caught fire. Explosions echoed through the trees as fuel depots went up in flames. Local officials called it an accident, but people knew better. They saw the smoke. In Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014, the situation turned chaotic. The Belbek airbase near Sevastopol lit up the night sky as Ukrainian drones dodged Russian defenses and slammed into parked aircraft. Ammunition stores erupted like volcanoes. It wasn't just damage, it was humiliation. Russian telegram channels began filling with videos of burning runways, the distant thud of impacts, and trails of smoke cutting across the dawn sky. They tried to downplay it, but the evidence kept piling up. Then came the psychological warfare. Ukraine released footage, not just of the strikes, but of the drones themselves cruising above cities, mocking Russia's famed air defense. One video even showed a drone flying past the statue of Lenin before diving toward its target. It was haunting and effective. Back in Moscow, the Kremlin scrambled to respond. Denials, blame games, promises of retaliation. But internally, alarm bells were ringing. If Ukraine could reach this far, what else were they capable of? Russian state media tried to spin it as a minor provocation, a nuisance. But military analysts weren't buying it. These weren't amateur attacks. They were coordinated, timed to overwhelm air defenses, using terrain and distraction. It wasn't desperation, it was evolution. For Ukraine, this was more than just striking back. It was reshaping the battlefield. Russia had long believed in its buffer zones, deep territory where it could prepare and regroup. But now, nowhere felt safe. The war had come home. And the effects rippled outward. Russian civilians near the border started fleeing, fearing what might come next. Cities like Belgorod began to feel like war zones. Schools closed, supermarkets went dark. People whispered about evacuation plans. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed his nation with a calm but firm voice. They thought we wouldn't reach them, he said. They were wrong. What made this moment even more surreal was the contrast. While Russia still tried to bombard Ukrainian cities with missiles, it was now defending its own turf against something smaller, cheaper, and smarter. The cost of each Ukrainian drone? A few $1,000s. The cost of the damage they caused? Millions. But beyond the rubble and flames, something bigger had shifted. Momentum. Ukraine's forces were no longer just holding the line. They were turning the page, writing a new chapter in warfare. This wasn't just about territory, it was about the mind. Making Russia question its own invincibility. And in this psychological war, Ukraine was winning. For months, Russian propaganda had painted Ukraine as weak, broken, and dependent. But now, that illusion cracked. The symbolism was sharp, drone after drone flying above once protected cities. Modern slingshots in a David versus Goliath fight. And while Russia tried to jam GPS, shoot them down, or hack their control, it became clear they were chasing shadows. By the time they reacted, the drones were already gone. the targets already burning. Even in Moscow, the anxiety was real. Government buildings ramped up security, radar towers stayed on around the clock. Officials spoke in coded language during press briefings, trying to downplay the impact. But soldiers on the ground knew the truth. They had underestimated Ukraine again. In one particularly bold strike, a drone managed to hit a military logistics hub in Rostov, an area far from the front lines. Supplies, vehicles, and fuel storage were destroyed. That single strike sent a ripple through Russian supply chains. Convoys were delayed, commanders started second-guessing where to store weapons. And just like that, Ukraine had turned drones into not just tools of war, but instruments of chaos. What's even more impressive? Many of these drones weren't foreign imports. They were Ukrainian-made. Simple, cost-effective, deadly. A result of innovation born from necessity. While Russia poured billions into outdated tanks and Cold War doctrines, Ukraine went agile. Smart warfare, asymmetric strikes. Even Russian military bloggers, usually full of bluster, started sounding alarms. "Our skies are no longer ours," one wrote. "We fight ghosts." And that fear seeped into the troops. Russian soldiers began abandoning posts. Videos surfaced of units refusing to stay near fuel depots or airfields. Why? Because at any moment the sky might buzz, and seconds later, boom. Meanwhile, on the Ukrainian side, morale surged. The strikes weren't just military victories, they were proof. Proof that resistance worked, that innovation mattered, that courage could reach across borders. And as the days passed, the strikes didn't stop. They adapted, grew sharper. Drones flew lower, faster, with smarter routes. Some even carried multiple payloads, hitting several targets before going down. Ukraine had turned the tables, and Russia was on the back foot. But even more telling than the explosions was the silence. Putin didn't make a grand speech. There was no fiery retaliation, just silence. And that silence, it screamed louder than any bomb. Because behind closed doors, they were scared. Scared that if they retaliated too aggressively, the West might double down. Scared that their people might panic. Scared of losing control. In a way, these drones weren't just flying machines. They were messages. Messages that said, "We see you." Messages that whispered, "You're not untouchable." And the world watched. From Washington to Warsaw, military analysts leaned in. They took notes, because this wasn't just a Ukrainian story. It was the future of warfare unfolding in real time. Small drones, big message. Precision over size, courage over fear. And the map of the war changed. No longer just lines in Donbas. It became radar dots near Moscow, fires in Kursk, blackouts in Belgorod. And every strike told the same story. The hunter had become the hunted. In the villages of eastern Ukraine, farmers paused their tractors to check the sky, not for Russian jets, but for Ukrainian drones returning from mission. Kids whispered about ghost machines. Soldiers smiled at the change in momentum. One commander said, "For the first time, we're not waiting for them, they're waiting for us." And that shift, it was priceless. What Ukraine did wasn't just military, it was psychological, strategic, symbolic. They turned fear into fuel, isolation into innovation, and weakness into a weapon. The drones weren't just tools, they were storytellers, telling Russia that the war had changed, that nothing was safe, that every night, every base, every warehouse might be next. And that's the power of belief. When a smaller force refuses to back down, when it dares to interrupt, when it makes the mighty sweat. This wasn't just a series of strikes, it was a statement. A line drawn across the night sky saying, "We're not done yet." And as long as those drones keep flying, that message will echo louder than any speech. Ukraine didn't just hit targets, they hit pride. And in that moment, burning, buzzing, unrelenting, they rewrote the rules of war.